Thousands of American and Filipino troops are staging military drills on an island near the disputed territory with China. It's despite warnings from Beijing that the exercise could lead to confrontation. The U.S. has been boosting its presence in the Asia-Pacific region, a strategy seen as an attempt to challenge China's growing influence in the area. Asia Times roving correspondent Pepe Escobar is in the studio with me. Pepe, thanks for being with us today. So, a mock assault to retake an island in disputed waters. Surely the U.S. and the Philippines must see how that will irritate China. What's going on?
Well, it's a true and tested strategy of divide and rule. The 10 Southeast Asian countries, ASEAN, they have a mechanism called ASEAN plus 3. Includes China, Japan, and South Korea. So they can disputes that trade, commerce, and even military disputes, they can settle in this table. You don't need to show up with a naval exercise and then try to do some post-gunboat diplomacy, which is the case. So it is a provocation, obviously.
Yeah, and last week, China warned that the drills will raise the risk of a military confrontation. How likely is that to happen?
They know since last year, when even before Obama launched the strategic pivoting from the Middle East to Asia, which is not a pivoting anymore because the U.S. will never relinquish their bases from the Middle East to Central Asia, what the Pentagon used to call the arc of instability, right? Hillary Clinton published an article in November last year called America's Pacific Century, which is not the last one. It's actually the 21st. So, it's a concerted White House, State Department, CIA, Pentagon agenda. And the agenda is confrontational and militaristic. This pivoting includes more troops in Australia, those Americans that are going to Australia not to surf, but to engage in something slightly more lethal, right? Probably another base in the Philippines in the short term. Inciting animosity, especially between Philippines and Vietnam against China. And the leadership in Beijing, they can see through it. They already anticipated. In fact, 10 years ago, before 9/11, I think it's important that we backtrack before 9/11. 10 years ago, during 9/11, a few days afterwards, the Chinese saw that they had a window of opportunity of 20 years to concentrate on internal development without any provocations from the U.S. This window is gone in 10 years. So now this pivoting means that Al-Qaeda bogeyman, that ghost that never existed, in fact, is now completely over. So Obama put America in a kind of psychoanalytic divan. They say, okay, your trauma is over. Now let's concentrate on our competitor. And our biggest competitor is China. The problem is, instead of devising a strategy of a non-confrontational strategy, which is something that you can read even in a book by Zbigniew Brzezinski, for instance. His latest book, he's not confrontational towards China. And Brzezinski is a higher up in Washington intellectual circles. Obama goes to the Pentagon and he launches what is essentially a military confrontation in slow motion. So you can imagine what's ahead, especially if we have our good or not so good friend Mitt Romney as president.
Do you think that the U.S. is going to remain sort of a white knight if confrontation does start, if it does begin?
No, of course, and they're not crazy enough to start a war in the South China Sea. What they want to do is to keep provoking China, because the South China Sea, not only in terms of being a national strategic interest to China, is a very important oil and gas tanker route. So everything that includes the Arabian Sea, the South China Sea, and the Western Pacific, which China sees as a immediate area of influence and the midterm area of influence. The U.S. Navy is going to be there, and they will be looking for trouble. That's for sure.
Now, this strategy in the region, is it only about contesting Chinese influence, this U.S. strategy?
Basically, yes, because what does the U.S. have to offer the ASEAN countries, for instance, at the moment? In fact, the only thing they are being offered is Myanmar telling them, come here and invest in us because we are now a semi-democracy. Nobody's buying that. And Aung San Suu Kyi herself, she knows that she can buy that because she was allowed once again, a small window of exposure. It's not that Myanmar now is a democracy, very far from. It's a very ruthless military dictatorship. There was also very wily and very clever. Okay, if we open a little bit, these Americans and Europeans, they'll come begging to invest in our country. Oil, gas, minerals, strategic reserves, a population that is relatively well educated, so it's great. What the US is actually offering these countries, and I include Vietnam, the Philippines, Singapore, Indonesia, nothing.
So what's the next move, in your view, Pepe? What can now happen to make this all sort of go away?
Look, no crystal balls. I think if we stick to the facts on the ground, the possibilities of a spark turning into something much more complicated are you have myriad areas. You have the Yellow Sea, you have those troops still in South Korea, you have the American troops still in Japan, you have more troops still in the Philippines, you have American troops in Australia. Maybe one day we could have a small confrontation in the Strait of Malacca, for instance. So it's part of the move towards a multipolar world that's being contested by Washington almost in a blind fury, because they don't have the intellectual equipment to try to reorganize themselves to being one power among many other regional powers. And in Asia and in Eurasia, that includes, basically it's Russia and China. From a Pentagon point of view, no, don't forget that the official doctrine in Washington, the Pentagon doctrine, is called full spectrum dominance. Many people think that we made that up. No, it's in the 2002 National Security Strategy, actually, and includes full domain of, let's go all over again, air, land, sea, cyberspace, and outer space.
That's right. All right. Well, Asia Times roving correspondent, that's Pepe Escobar. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.